People travel around the world to visit Utah. Now, most people come for the stunning national parks that we are lucky enough to have. But there is another reason why people travel to Utah from around the world. In 2002, it was put on full display. Anyone who has been watching the news in Utah knows that this year's snow has been a little more intense than most years.
Utah's had an incredible start to the winter season, and that snow just keeps piling up.
Yeah, Alta, Deer Valley, Solitude, and Snow Basin have more snow piled up than ever before.
With today's snowstorm, the state of Utah has set a record for snowpack.
Snowpack. What does snowpack even mean? Well, snowpack is not the measurement of the actual snow, it's the measurement of the water that's contained in this snow. And why are they making such a big deal out of it? Well, the last time we saw the amount of snow melting, this happened. And this.
Salt Lake City streets turned into sandbagged rivers.
Recently, after its completion, the concert venue out at Saltaire was flooded by the Great Salt Lake because of the water that we saw that year. Now, this amount of snowfall is particularly exciting for all of you avid skiers, snowboarders, snowshoers, snowmobilers, and all the other things that people like to do in the snow. Utah is believed to have the greatest snow on Earth. It's even on our license plates. Although it all comes down to preference, we do have resorts that always seem to be on the list of greatest ski resorts in the world. One in particular keeps popping into my mind, and the reason it keeps popping into my mind is because of those same news clips about Snowpack.
Another day and yet another record set for snowfall in Utah. Alta Ski Resort now reporting more than 900 inches of snow this year, and we may not be done yet.
Alta Ski Resort. See, this got me thinking because I knew that Alta used to be a mining town. Turns out that Alta's history is still pretty rich. In 1862, part of the United States Army was stationed in Utah. This group of men was led by a Colonel Patrick E. Connor. Colonel Connors was known for allowing his men to prospect when they had some downtime. Now, there are conflicting stories, one being that it was the colonel himself, and another that it was one of the soldiers' wives who came across the silver. The development of Little Cottonwood Canyon would soon grow with Colonel Connor's discovery. Thus began what happens at most mining areas in Utah. Several mines began popping up. Now, two problems faced the mines early on, and they kind of go hand in hand. The first was that in order to get the silver from the ore, it had to go through a refining process. So the second problem was transportation. Now, as the Transcontinental Railroad pushed further into Utah, each mile of track completed brought the success of the Little Cottonwood mines that much closer to becoming a profitable reality. May 10th of 1869, the Golden Spike had made it possible to ship 10 tons of ore. The Utah Central Railroad was completed in January of 1870, which connected Salt Lake with the Transcontinental Railroad near Ogden. Then the Utah Southern Railroad by September of 1871 was operating to Sandy Station from Salt Lake City. Next, the Wasatch and Jordan Valley was built, going east from Sandy to the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon. And then finally, the railroad was completed to Alta, which would soon be the business center of the district, in 1876. Available capital in Utah was limited at that time. Stock companies from eastern United States and from abroad, particularly from England, financed most of these efforts. Two of the most prominent mines of the district, the Emma and the Flagstaff, were at some time controlled by British investors. In 1873, an event occurred with the Emma mine, which threatened to drive off British investment in the district. Following the purchase of the Emma mine by British investors for the sum of $5 million, the rich ore ran out. The effect of these events would cast a cloud on Western American mining stocks in general, and particularly those of the Little Cottonwood area. With a growing population coming to claim their piece of the silver pie, the area grew rapidly. Several small communities began to form in the canyon. One of the biggest communities in the area at the time was the community of Granite, located near the mouth of the canyon, to house mostly those who were working on the quarry granite for the Salt Lake City Temple. Another large community was called Central City. Now, Central City consisted of a sawmill along with several small boarding houses and businesses. The town soon boasted of a population of 216. As the mine's success began to really take off, more houses and shops began popping up. The town of Alta was beginning to form, and in the fall of 1871, Alta was established only 850 yards east of Central City, on what was the widest flat area of the canyon. Starting with the Alta Hotel, Central City merchants began relocating their log buildings. The borders of the two communities soon merged, and the name Central City was dropped, and its residents were absorbed into Alta. Alta had grown to about 150 buildings. By 1872, several thousand seasonal residents lived in the formerly unincorporated community of Alta. Now, in Alta's heyday, it would have consisted of 4 hotels, 7 restaurants, 6 sawmills, 2 drugstores, 1 courthouse, 1 school, and 26 saloons. About 2/3 of the inhabitants living in Little Cottonwood Canyon in 1880 were miners. In addition to the peril that existed for those who spent considerable time in the bars, the wintertime brought an even more deadly menace to the district. The winter of 1873 and 74, a disastrous snowslide swept down from the mountain and destroyed about 1/2 of the town. 60 persons reportedly lost their lives in the main blocks of the town. A fire followed the avalanche, and between the 2 destroyers, the town was completely wiped out. Then the mines began drying up, and then other avalanches and fires swept through the town in the following years. In 1885, a slide swept down from Rustler Mountain, partially destroying the rebuilt town. And following this slide, the town was never extensively rebuilt. Many people just couldn't justify staying in Alta or rebuilding. The area experienced 2 different modest resurgences in mining in the 1900s. These resurgences were short-lived, especially with the Great Depression. With the mining era ending for the most part in Alta, a new era would soon take hold. The most interesting part is that the new era would be centered around something that had essentially destroyed the town several times. We actually have to go back to the mining days in 1870. There were records in the town of the miners using skis as a form of transportation to get around in the winter months. Skiing was progressing in the canyon enough that in 1884 a small ski competition was held in the canyon. Skiing was starting to pick up traction in the national scene in 1904, and by 1915 it started to hit Utah. In the 1930s, Alta's mining resurgence were drying up, and the canyon was nearly empty. One of the exceptions was a man named George H. Watson. Watson owed many of the mine claims that remained in the area. Watson was still trying to make money in the canyon. In fact, back in 1922, the old railway was operated as the Alta Scenic Byway, and the operator, George H. Watson, featured tours to go underground in the workings of the old Emma silver mine. One year, he even held an election and named himself mayor. Mayor Watson was known for getting around the area on skis during the winter months. One day, Watson read in a magazine about these ski areas that were popping up, and he decided to do some investigation. After about 200 letters to different ski areas, he realized that he was probably living on one. With Watson realizing the potential of the area, he made an agreement to donate 700 acres to the Forest Service on only one condition, that they turn it into a ski area. After the agreement was made, the U.S. Forest Service hired Norwegian skiing legend Alf Engen to help develop the area. Engen told the Forest Service that the area was perfect, except for that it needed to plant some trees. The mining operations had nearly cleaned the whole canyon of trees. Alf Engen was a world-renowned skier along with his brothers. Alf would fall in love with Alta and become a huge name in the development of Alta and Utah skiing. In the fall of 1938, a group of Salt Lake City businessmen who were avid skiers got together and formed the Alta Winter Sports Association, later known as the Salt Lake City Winter Sports Association. Our good friend Mayor Watson became one of the presidents of the association. Now they recognized that as fun as skiing was, it would be even better if you didn't have to hike to the top of the mountain every time you wanted to come down. The second chairlift in the United States was built in 1938. The Winter Sports Association, which ran the newly operated Alta ski area, made a deal to purchase the old aerial tram that had carried ore down Little Cottonwood Canyon in the early 1900s. On Sunday, January 15, 1938, the lift was used for the first time, carrying 350 people up the mountain. From January 1939 through April 1940, 86,000 skier lift rides were given by the Collins Chair. Now, early on, one of the challenges the Alta ski area was going to have to deal with was the avalanche problem that had plagued the town that once sat in the canyon. How do you stop such a powerful and unpredictable act of nature? Well, you have to make it predictable. Little Cottonwood Canyon is a very narrow canyon. Sprinkle in that there are several avalanche chutes that run straight at the road. It makes it so that the avalanche affects Alta almost every storm. Due to this precarious position, Alta has actually been at the forefront of understanding and studying avalanches. The U.S. Forest Service set up a group to monitor and study avalanches back in 1938 as skiing was picking up traction. This ultimately would turn into the Avalanche Research Center. Following the close of the Second World War, a more expert system was developed to explode explosive charges in the snow. Although the artillery concept was borrowed from Europe, its application at Alta was the first in the United States. Using range charts, the recoilless rifles could be blind fired during storms and other periods of poor visibility. By using explosives, you help mitigate the unpredictable nature of the avalanches. Only one of Alta's original buildings has withstood the test of time. The Stillwell General Store, which first served Alta's mine workers. It was then converted into a post office, then later it was transformed into the Snow Pine Lodge, a public shelter for skiers. After a recent renovation in 2019, the lodge is almost unrecognizable. However, it still has many of the original materials of the old building. Back in the 1940s, Mayor Watson would sit around the fireplace at the lodge and tell stories. Also in the 1940s, Alf Engen was hired by Alta to direct their ski slope. He stayed as a director for 40 years, then 10 years as an ambassador. Alf also started a free ski lesson in the Salt Lake Valley. Many believe that these free ski lessons are why skiing got so popular as much as it did. Now, over the years, Alta continued to expand, adding new lifts and runs to keep up with the growing demand for skiing. By the 1960s, it had become a popular destination for skiers around the world. In the 1980s and the 1990s, Alta faced legal challenges over its policy of only allowing skiers on its slopes. The snowboarder problem was on the rise at ski resorts around the world.
And they're dangerous because if one of these skateboards or ski boards, whatever they're called, hit a person, they'd break their leg because they're just like a missile.
The resort argued that this policy was necessary to maintain the quality of the skiers' experience, but some critics claimed it was discriminatory. The legal battles ultimately ended in Alta's favor, and the resort maintained its policy. These claims would actually resurge many times throughout the years, but today Alta is known for only allowing skiers on its lifts. So now we are caught up to today. This winter we have seen a crazy amount of snow. The town of Alta, now a small but vibrant community, serves as a base for visitors to the ski area. Alta's story, in my eyes, is one of taking something that is seen as one of the downfalls and turning it into its greatest strength. The snow that plagued Alta with these avalanches would be the reason for its success, as people from around the world travel to its slopes. We can also be like Alta and take things that we don't like about ourselves and turn it into our greatest strengths. Thank you for watching. Now, if you liked this video, share it with your friends and don't forget to subscribe. Bye.